Marks & Spencer has been accused of allowing the exploitation of staff in its UK supply chain. A union representing 300 agency workers at DHL distribution centre in Wiltshire claims they're paid less to do the same work as non-agency staff. The GMB union also says they're being guaranteed only a few hours of work each week, but are expected to be on call around the clock, and some are disciplined for turning down shifts. Domingo Diaz handles Marks & Spencer stock at the centre in Swindon. He started working there 5 years ago through an employment agency.
A permanent worker have their fixed hours. As of now, we are paid less, around 2.50 pence or £2. We are being called for weekend Saturdays and Sundays, where Sundays the permanent guys are getting double payment, but we are not. When we question what is the salary we'll get for Sundays, but it is there are no hours for agency workers. Whenever we want, we can call you.
And our reporter Alex Burton has been looking at this. Alex, should agency workers have the same rights as people they work alongside?
Yes, they should. All temps should have the same rights as staff from day one, with the exception of pay. Then after 12 weeks, temporary staff should be paid exactly the same as anyone doing the same job in the same place. That's been the case since 2011, when EU legislation was introduced to try and guarantee agency staff the same pay and conditions as workers who are directly employed.
But Domingos says he's been working there for 5 years, and yet he's still paid less than other people he works alongside.
Yes, and that's because he signed something called a Swedish derogation contract. Now, that's another piece of law which means agency workers sign away their right to equal pay in return for a regular wage which they earn regardless of whether they're needed. It's a bit of a trade-off, really. It means steady income, but probably a lower rate of pay. Now, the problem here is that these workers are only guaranteed a small amount of money, 7 hours of minimum wage work each week, and the agency doesn't find them work elsewhere on the weeks when the centre can only offer them minimal hours. So, in this case, the trade-off doesn't offer very steady income at all. Domingos could be handling Marks & Spencer stock for 7 hours one week and 40 the next. He also says he didn't realise he was signing up to this arrangement. Nicholas Lakeland is an employment lawyer. I asked him to have a look at one of the contracts.
It's poorly written, I have to say. It's dense in its language, it's long, some of the paragraphs are quite heavy-handed. So you can understand that the average person in the street is going to find it extremely difficult to understand what this contract says. Of course, the logical thing from the agency's point of view is to try and maximise the number of hours that these employees are employed for, because, of course, the greater the number of hours that they do, the more the agency earns. But that's up to the agency to go out there and source as many assignments for its workforce as it can. I think where you have a lot of demand for skilled or more complex jobs, then perhaps I think people will be doing better using this particular model than they might otherwise.
So, Shari, these kind of contracts are legal and they could work well for some people, but they weren't meant to be a way of paying people less over the long term. Hannah Reid works in employment rights for the TUC.
Employers are using this loophole in equal treatment rights for agency workers to drive down their wages bills. Some agency workers are earning £2 or £5 an hour and up to £145 a week, less than permanent staff doing exactly the same job.
So what should Marks & Spencer customers think about all this?
Well, M&S promises to treat all of its workers in its supply chain fairly. Its Code of Ethics says it's committed to improving what it describes as the lives and communities of those who work for and with us. M&S didn't want to talk on the programme about this, saying the centre's run for them by the logistics firm DHL and referred me on to them. DHL said in a statement that employing people this way is common throughout the industry. I also tried speaking to the agency, but when I called them, they hung up.
So is there any likely change for these Marks & Spencer supply chain workers?
Well, the TUC wants to put an end to these kind of contracts, and they complained about it to the European Commission about 18 months ago. Here's Hannah Reid from the TUC again.
Certainly, unions that represent members in the logistics sector say, yes, it's becoming increasingly common practice to see these contracts being used. And the TUC's concern is that if the European Commission doesn't act now, and indeed the UK government, this practice is going to become more widespread and agency workers are going to continue facing pay discrimination in the workplace.
They're expecting to get a decision from the European Commission on that later this year.
Alex Burton, thank you.